I'm Dr. Allan Perel, and this is Conversations in Medicine. I'm Dr. Allan Perel, and this is Conversations in Medicine, a program bringing the cutting-edge topics of medicine to the Staten Island and tri-state community. We have a super show today. A very special group is here, and we're going to talk about On Your Mark. On Your Mark is a tremendous program on Staten Island, and we're going to talk about some words and some things that many of us don't know about. Day-hab programs, group homes, services with individuals with special needs, jobs programs, research, and really being able to bring to the community, to our friends, patients, colleagues, clients, individuals, things and services that are available to them. So let me introduce everyone who's here. I have Joseph Gorey, pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, thank
Jennifer Larson.
Thank you.
Joseph DeVivo.
Thank you.
And the Executive Director, John Bellotti. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
So guys, tell me, you were educating me a little bit before we came on about words. And how do we describe people with special needs? And as a neurologist, I see people with various abilities, sometimes with disabilities from strokes, from multiple sclerosis, from various disorders. So why don't you guys tell me a little bit, when an individual has a special need, whether it's an emotional problems, whether it's individuals who have developmental delays, there are certain terms that have come in and out of vogue and more appropriate. And sometimes when we talk about words, they mean a lot. So tell us.
Well, I think that the word individual right now is in vogue, and I think that there is a wide spectrum. So I think that it's important to take everyone on an individual basis.
So when someone has a special need, how do you characterize it?
You know, we try to steer away from labeling based on their disability. Rather than saying that someone's wheelchair bound, we'll say it's an individual that uses a wheelchair, or it's someone with an intellectual disability rather than someone who is intellectually disabled. So we try to make sure that we put the person first to categorize them when we're discussing their needs.
Very similar, we've seen it in mental health. You know, years ago people would speak of someone as being schizophrenic. And they're not schizophrenic, it's a person suffering from schizophrenia, a person in recovery. And we do, and everything's person-centered because each person is an individual.
And I think I see that in the hospital. I work at Richmond University Medical Center and Staten Island University Hospital. And there's nothing that upsets me more when a resident or a young doctor or even a senior doctor says the person who has a heart attack in 22 or the stroke in 25, you're right, it's a person. It's not someone who has that medical condition, psychological condition, and that's how we're able to adjust more. And I'm going to apologize to you guys because I still think of people as patients of mine, clients. My wife is a social worker on your board. And the idea of what words we use have really transcended over time. And I think the big thing that we look at is some words that are somewhat pejorative or negative, like mentally retarded, really have gone out of favor and really something that we don't say. And that's, I think, that really we've evolved, not that the person who has any of these conditions has changed, but we've really evolved.
And very interesting that you say that. We run a very comprehensive training program. And with all of our new employees that come in, we try to do our really due diligence to expose them and teach them about Willowbrook, to teach them about terminology that we no longer use. Many of the staff that are coming, they were born 20 years after Willowbrook, so that's ancient history to them. So for them to know about it, to know what the atrocities that happen, and why we are doing what we're doing today is a result of all those things.
You guys have a wonderful reputation. You guys are renowned around the tri-state area, even beyond. Tell us a little bit about On Your Mark. I mean, that's what we're here for tonight. in order for people to know about it, so maybe tell us a little bit about On Your Mark, the history of it, and what services you provide.
Oh, well, On Your Mark started in 1979, I guess with the closing of Willowbrook. There was such a need for programs, and people really had nowhere to go. So our founder and longtime executive director, my predecessor, Gene Spatz, and Jim Alaco, he's still going. 40 years later, he's our deputy executive director, in a dojo on Manor Road in the back room, to try to service people with that had health needs and fitness and gross motor skills to improve upon them. So that was really the start. Then we developed our recreation programs and soccer leagues and ice skating and basketball programs, and kind of fast forward to today, where we service over 700 individuals.
Mm-hmm. So let's go over what kind of services you have. You were talking about employment with me before.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about how does someone, when someone comes to your group,
Yeah.
actually maybe even one step before, how does someone get to your group?
Well, we have two different employment service departments. One is a supported department, employment, excuse me. And in that, if an individual wants to come and get a job, what they'll do is we'll start with assessments, and we'll see what kind of jobs they would like to learn and what skills they'd like to acquire. And then we'll work on interview skills. So we'll do mock interviews with them with basic questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? From there, they do job searching. We work on work ethics with them to arrive on time. Do they know to punch in and out? Is their paycheck accurate? And then once they've acquired the job, we also go to support them at the location. So we'll have a job coach go out to them, and there they'll work on any skills that they might not know independently 100%, and they'll work on them individually with them, as well as they'll talk to the employer to make sure that they
So
also...
what kind of employers do you find? So say someone comes to you with
Yeah.
certain abilities, and we'll say with certain issues also, and they're looking for a job. How do you put them together? And give us some examples.
Well, that's a great question, and I think that well, first of all, we partner up with many different businesses on Staten Island, whether it's Home Depot and ShopRite, the Staten, and you guys could join in.
Oh,
here.
yeah,
We have
absolutely.
some Verizon, so that's one way that we partner up. But then we found that they needed some more supports, and there's a lot of expectations sometimes when there's an outside employer. So we said, let's open our own businesses, and I think that's something that really makes On Your Mark unique. So we have the On Your Mark Cafe that's been open since 2003. We partner up with the Children's Museum for the snack zone. We have a chocolate shop, the On Your Mark Chocolatiers, where we make all of our own chocolates with Joe's help. We have Exceptional Creations, where we make art and we make flower arrangements. We have Novelties, where we create T-shirts. So when they work for On Your Mark, our businesses, and Joe's our director of business initiatives, we get a chance to train them and to try to then find jobs out in the community where we can partner up. So it's a very, very unique program that Joe's running there. Yeah.
They're
And it sounds
learning
like you-
marketable skills.
And it sounds
there.
like you guys are out to have someone succeed.
Oh,
So if someone
absolutely.
doesn't do well, say at the chocolate factory, they might do better at some of the other jobs.
absolutely.
Do people transition well from one to
If
the
they
other?
need to, or if they want to. I mean, we are person-centered as well. So if you don't want to be anywhere, then we're certainly not going to put you there. So
And that's critical.
Absolutely.
Everything is driven by what the person wants. So, I mean, a great story is we had a young lady who was working in our cafe, and she just loved this one store, this one Beans and Leaves. And that's where she wanted to work. So her job coach went with her, and they went up there for coffee and met some of the people, and one thing led to another, and within a week she was hired. And with the smile on her face, that's what it's all about.
And that's partnering up
Yeah.
in the community. It's beautiful to see. But they will, during the interview process, they'll tell you what they like and whether, and we try
Absolutely.
to support that.
Yeah.
That's marvelous. I mean, and that's some of the things that we sometimes don't think about as much. And that's really great. Let's talk about some of the other things. Term that I really wasn't that familiar with. You know, when I saw the word day have, I'm saying to myself, is it day rehab? Putting the words together. Tell me about your day have program.
Jennifer's the director of one of our day habs.
Yes. So our day habilitation program, and it's interesting, you said, you know, when you write the word habilitation, it spell checks as an error. It says, do you mean rehab? We are teaching skills. So rehab is when you're relearning the skills that you may have lost due to an accident or something. But we're actually teaching these skills that will be transferred later on to employment services or some business opportunities. We have 2 day habilitation sites, and our individuals that participate are split based on their different abilities and their different needs, whether they have certain medical needs, behavioral needs, vocational interests, things like that. We make sure, like we said before with Joe, about person-centered. You know, we have at the site that I supervise, we have a lot of therapeutic options there. We have art therapy and music therapy, and we have an aquatic center. It's a beautiful heated pool where our individuals can really get that full range of motion, where they might have more difficulty in our, you know, a fitness center. They could move more freely in the water. So we have options like that. And our other location at 120 Victory, our individuals are broken up into different groups where they can learn different marketable skills, like Joe said. They can learn some basic cooking skills that they might be able to then transfer into one of our supported areas, such as a cafe or the snack zone. They can really fine-tune those cooking skills that they'll be able to use in the future. We have maintenance departments and clerical departments, and everybody's there under one roof, so that way we can really make those observations and work with our employment services team as well.
So back to even the beginning, because as really as a
Sure.
novice listening to the tremendous amount of things you do. So when someone is very young, they're part of the Department of Education. And they go on till about 21, I believe, you know, and then your programs start after 21 or before. Well, tell me about when you start with these people, and is there any age limit, high or low for
So
patients?
specifically, day hab will start, it could start at 18, but most of the time it does start at 21. But we do have our recreation program where we do start much younger. That'll be on nights and weekends.
Community habilitation.
Yeah.
Works with individuals in their home, and it could be kids.
Yeah.
So tell me about day hab. So as we said before, so usually 18 to 21, somewhere in that range.
Sure.
Family calls you up and said, hi, my child is no longer going to be in part of the school system. And what programs, how do you determine what programs they have? Are these all-day programs, twice-a-week programs, different for different people?
We meet specifically with the families to see what they're looking for. Some families are just looking for something to do on the nights and weekends. So then we would actually refer them to our recreation, family support departments, because maybe they're pursuing something otherwise. Some of our individuals participate in CSI has some programs, for education as after high school. But most parents are calling us because their child's aging out of high school and they're looking for another continuing program. And we'll do multiple assessments to see what program site would be the most appropriate for them. And then also we have, again, community habilitation. Maybe an individual is done with school and they're really not looking to go into a day program, but they do need some additional supports at home. One of the things that a lot of our community habilitation specialists work with are ADL skills, so activities of daily living. And they'll help the individual to maybe work on personal hygiene or to learn certain chores that they can do in the home to become more independent and then hopefully, move out one day or require less support from mom and dad.
Is there any age that's more vulnerable or not? Meaning that if someone is 35, 40, 45, and new programs have come out over time, maybe they were home and their family, their parents are a little bit older now, really can't care for them as much. How do you transition into those people, and how do you mix people of different ages?
Specifically in our day program, we do have a senior group as well, which is very nice.
Yeah.
Many of them are in their mid-40s, so by no means seniors, but they have called themselves the senior group. They have dubbed themselves the senior. But so that might be a group that's more appropriate for someone who who maybe has done the day program thing already and they're just looking for a change. Maybe they're in another agency and they just have tried, or maybe they've been home and now they're looking for something else to do. And that's one of our most active groups, that they're out in the community participating and volunteering almost every day of the week. So that's where it might be a more appropriate fit for someone like that. Or also, to sort of add to your question a little bit, we have a residential program as well. That's something that a lot of parents worry about, is what's going to happen to my son or daughter when I'm no longer here to take care of them. Many parents are starting to put the moves in place now to plan for the future. That way, with such limited resources for residential placement, they can at least start to make the plans now 20 or 30 years ahead of time when it becomes necessary.
You alluded to it before, but tell me about your clinical services that you provide.
Okay,
Joe?
we have a great clinical department. On your mark, they're all on your mark staff. We have a clinical services department that's supervised by our clinical coordinator, who's a nurse, BSN, and we have about 13 to 14 RNs providing medical oversight in both the day rehabilitation programs as well as the residential programs, in addition to providing supports for ComHab, community rehabilitation, and all the other programs. In addition to that, we have behaviorists, and that's a behavioral supervisor who's a licensed mental health counselor, and about 6 part-time behaviorists providing behavioral interventions, suggestions, training to not only the staff, but sometimes even the families if they ask for it. We have a part-time clinical social worker who does counseling as well as entitlements and concrete services. In addition, we have a part-time nutritionist on staff, for special diets that are ordered by doctors. And in addition, we use outside clinical services that come into the residence and into the day hab, OT, PT, speech, psychology. And we use the services that are out in the community.
Tell me who pays for this. I mean, we have families that are always concerned, limited budgets, limited means. How are your programs sponsored? Are they privately, publicly sponsored?
Well, Medicaid, Social Security, and a lot of fundraising.
Yeah.
But then as a family, just because there's always that concern, if they call you up, will they be paying a lot out of pocket for this, or most of these programs covered through?
Well, it would be required to have a Medicaid waiver, and so if they wanted to access any of the programs, a governing agency would be OPWDD, Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, and they have what they call the front door, and they would access it through the front door, and that would make sure that they would get the Medicaid waiver secured.
And really what I'm trying to get at is most people, if they do call you on your mark, you don't think it's difficult to Google the term on Staten Island in order to contact you. I think they're concerned about cost to them probably are small.
So
most people do fall into a category where it's covered.
No cost if they couldn't afford it. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I think is so important, so people can explore this and not be concerned about having to mortgage their house in order to have these certain programs that we have. You mentioned Willowbrook before, and being all of us living on Staten Island, being on Staten Island, working on Staten Island, there was a stigma that was associated with people with developmental delays, mental retardation, terms that we've used, people with psychiatric problems, emotional disabilities. And the idea of how you said that after Willowbrook and the whole expose of it, something like On Your Mark came out. And maybe you can give us a little bit of the history and in a sense for people who maybe aren't even aware of what the word Willowbrook, the connotation of that really meant. How people with various emotional and psychiatric problems were treated in somewhat less than humane manner. And we're, from that process, a group like On Your Mark and various services are available.
Well, back in the day of Willowbrook, that was the way individuals
So tell
were
us
cared
about
for.
that's the institutionalization.
Oh, yeah. So
tell us a
Willowbrook
little bit.
was an institution, right, on the grounds of the College of Staten Island. And back in 1966, when Robert F. Kennedy visited there, he described it as bordering on a snake pit. And it wasn't until about 6 years later when Geraldo Rivera went into Willowbrook where he became famous with his expose on what was going on at Willowbrook. Now, what was going on was poor staff ratios to the patients that they were providing services to, wards where there was maybe 2 attendants, as they were called at the time, to maybe 60 people. Mealtime was horrific. There was no kind of therapies going on. Now, at that time, prior to that, that's what the options were for families. They may have had a child that was disabled, whether it was physically disabled or learning disabled or developmentally disabled, and they were told by their pediatricians, by their family members, by their spiritual leaders that you can't take care of this child. This child needs to go into the state school. And at the time, that's what was across America. And across the state of New York were large institutions. Willowbrook being at the height, 5,000 people were at Willowbrook. And that was the largest institution in the world at that particular time. What resulted in that were class action suits, the Willowbrook consent decree, and the mandate that everyone needed to be discharged and placed out of an institution in the community and serviced and to live a life in a dignified manner.
And I think the evolution of this and the revolution to what you guys have provided on Staten Island really is to be, of course, commended. You said over a 40-year period. So tell us a little bit about what the future holds for you, Mark. What kind of programs are you looking to move on? What kind of support do you need from the community? What if I could tell and we have a wonderful audience at it. We have found all the people on Staten Island watching us tonight.
Okay.
What kind of things do you want them to know about your organization? How could they help? You're available to them, but what kind of things would you say?
We're
to
going
them?
to continue to expand on the programs that we have. We have a lot of interesting things going on there with our day habs and many of our community partnerships. We're going to continue to expand. We have a community center on the corner of Forest Avenue and Victory Boulevard at 475 Victory Boulevard. We would like to expand into 485 next door. We need an elevator desperately in 475. That was the old Jewish Community Center, so we've done a lot of work there, bringing that building up to code. And we have much more, so we're going to continue to develop that site there. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, if someone, and our audience is from the whole tri-state area, if somebody has a relative, a child, brother or sister who's in need of services who don't live on Staten Island, who doesn't live on Staten Island, what programs are you familiar with, sister programs that might be in other communities? There's New York State, and I think you were mentioning New Jersey has its own set of rules based on state governance.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about what would I do if I lived in Brooklyn, if I was watching the show and I was in Bay Ridge, who would I call?
Okay, every county in New York State has an OPWDD office, and it's called the DDSO, or the DDRO. And within that...
Initials are tough.
I know.
So you have to help me with these, because I'm really slow with all these initials.
Developmental Disabilities Regional Office. I believe that's what it stands for.
Okay.
And in that setting, there is a front door. And the front door, if they're not already receiving services, that's where they would begin.
So tell us about front. We're going to break this down to really simple terms for someone like me.
Okay.
Front door, we heard before, means that there's a way to have access to this with I hate to say it, with relative ease. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that front door what it means?
Well,
or?
that's, I think, what they intended.
The intent.
That was
I
the
guess
state's
that is the
intention, yes.
intent. Yeah.
And that's, so they're, the best thing is to go on the site. So, I mean, in any borough, the family would call, and that's where they would begin. They would call the number that they would need to research that particular number for that county and begin the process.
And most of those counties, whether it's Kings County, Queens, have services.
Yes.
We'll have a local DDSO, DDRO.
And that's really able to do this. And with On Your Mark, you're exclusive to Staten Island, or are we exclusive?
We do serve Brooklyn. We do. We do. We had a program in Brooklyn for a long time, and now we do bus over to our community center.
Marvelous. So that's good to know about that. We were talking a little bit before about different types of developmental disabilities or problems that people have. Tell us a little bit about the more of the emotional disabilities and how you guys cope with it. And if there's any examples, I think what everyone is trying to listen for is, would my relative, would my friend, would my colleague, would they do well in this program? And there are people who have outbursts, and we think about the clients, the individuals, whatever word we use, there were issues. I mean, and the reason that's part of the medical complications of what they're being treated for, what they need help with. So tell me about some different examples of how you handle certain things that might be somewhat disruptive. Someone who might be disruptive at home, does that preclude them from being part of your programs? How do you handle that?
Do you want to start and then I'll...
Well, sure. All are individuals. So they have a developmental disability, number one, which is diagnosed prior to the age of 22. That's to be eligible for services. Now, everyone, regardless of what the disability is, may suffer from bouts of depression, or may have an impulse control disorder, or may have a conduct disorder, in addition to their developmental disability. And everyone needs are addressed after assessments in a manner that's personalized and person-centered, that's going to work for them. And I think in Jennifer's program, you guys deal with quite a bit of folks that...
Quite a bit, absolutely. And what we do to ensure, like you said, that it's not disruptive to the program day or for the group as a whole, is we ensure that we have appropriate staffing ratios and that we are constantly training and retraining our staff. We're reviewing behavior plans, we're meeting with clinicians, we're meeting with family members, trying to get advice, trying to think outside of the box. You know, we may see a behavior at program that the parents are not seeing, or vice versa. The parents will say, well, they're doing this at home, but they're not doing it for you. What's the difference there? It's important that we have everybody on board. There's so many people that are relevant to an individual's life. Think yourself as well. You know, all of us have people around us. Our individuals have nurses, behaviorists, parents, care coordinators, doctors, siblings, so many people that have opinions and advice to give us, that we make sure we incorporate that. And also one other thing that I think makes us stand out is we have such a strong focus on health and fitness, and a lot of times that's a good way to burn through some negative energy too. So we use a lot of our resources, such as the fitness center and the pool and the gymnasium, to try to downplay the physical.
So with clearly with your professionalism and the marvelous group that you have, it works.
Yes,
And
sir.
I think that's what people who worry about, the safety of their loved one, the concept of being treated with respect, having a good quality of life, learning things, employment, things of that nature. But it seems it works through your education, through certain techniques that are out there. So I'm going to now turn over to the executive director. If you were looking out to all of the elected officials who are here, and we know we all need programs and funding and things like that, what would you say to our elected officials, both here, locally, even on a federal basis? What could we do to help, and what do you need to make
First,
your program
I would
better?
say, please come and spend a couple of hours of your day and visit, and let me give you a tour, because I think that we could, a picture says 1,000 words, that you really need to come and see what our devoted and talented staff, what they do in the course of a day, and the services that we provide on your mark as a family. And I think that I'll extend an invitation to yourself. I would love to give you a tour.
I'd love to come. I think it's a marvelous
And I think
thing.
when they see what we do and how we do it, they really want to pitch in and help. They really do.
I'm going to ask you guys, we have a few seconds left. Anything that you'd like to just add to everyone who's watching and saying how this might fit in someone's life who they might not think would be a good candidate, someone who's disruptive at home, someone who's just not doing that well? What would you say to them about your programs and how many people you've really helped with this and really been able to overcome some of those barriers?
Sure. I mean, with the disruptive comment, we always have means on how to we always have ways on how to find the root of the behavior as well. That way we can try to combat it and avoid it reoccurring. So there is techniques that we do use in order to come up with why the behavior is occurring. I think that anyone is eligible as far as being able to access services through us. We have a lot of different programs, so depending on what the individual wants, you can certainly meet their needs.
I want to thank everyone here. It was a pleasure working with you, knowing you, and in your tremendous work. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Doctor.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.